Hello, and welcome to New Hire Safety Orientation Training. In this session, we will cover several important health and safety topics, including incident reporting, access to medical records, emergency action plan, fire prevention and use of extinguishers, bloodborne pathogen exposure control, lockout-tagout, hazard communication, personal protective equipment, and hearing conservation. Depending on your job tasks, additional training may be required that is site and/or job task specific. Your supervisor will review specific workplace safety training that is necessary. Reporting injuries and accidents that occur at work. Anyone who is injured or is involved in a near-miss situation at work is required to report this information immediately or as soon as possible to their supervisor. Prompt reporting of injuries is important so that you can receive the appropriate medical care and attention. Additionally, by reporting a near miss to your supervisor, potential unsafe conditions may be identified sooner, appropriate corrective actions can be taken, and injuries avoided. Part of the reporting process will involve the use of the incident report form to ensure all appropriate information is gathered. Additionally, near misses should be reported to proactively address workplace hazards and minimize risk of any potential injury to employees. As a reminder, regardless of how minor you think an injury may be, it should still be reported to a supervisor immediately. Access to medical and exposure records. The company wants you to know that you have the right to request a copy of any medical or exposure record that pertains to your job tasks. The company will provide a copy of this record to you at no cost within 15 days of your request. Requests for these records should be made in writing to Human Resources. In this section, we will review key elements of the Emergency Action Plan, which provides information regarding emergencies that may occur and how to properly respond. OSHA requires employers to have written emergency action plans. These plans contain information such as evacuation procedures, fire hazards, prevention and response to other potential emergencies such as medical emergencies, severe weather, and power outages. Emergency action plans are in place so that when an emergency does occur, such as fires, chemical spills, or severe weather events, we are prepared. In the event that an emergency requires evacuation of the facility, follow this procedure. Notify others if you see an emergency. When an alarm sounds, if you're trained to do so, shut down equipment. If you're not trained to do so, exit the building and meet at the assembly area. Don't leave this area until you've been accounted for and have been told it is safe to re-enter the building. All exits must have appropriate signs and be well lit. Emergency exits must be kept clear, including the way to the exit itself, and the other side of the exit. They cannot be blocked or locked at any time. In the event of a medical emergency at work, such as a severe workplace injury, heart attack, stroke, seizure, or other medical event, we must alert the authorities by calling 911. Upon arrival, assist emergency personnel with gaining access to the building and locating the injured personnel. In addition, notify management of the emergency details so that appropriate in-house responses and procedures are followed. There are several classes of fire that can occur based on the type of fuel that is burning. Class A fires involve common combustibles such as paper products and clothing. Class B are flammable liquids such as gases and propane. Class C are live electrical fires. Class D are combustible metals, and Class K are kitchen fires such as grease fires. In order to extinguish the fire, you need the right type of fire extinguisher for the fire that is burning. Here are some tips for fire extinguisher use. Keep the area around a fire extinguisher clear at all times so it is easy to access if needed. Do not fight fires if you do not know what is burning. When using a fire extinguisher, ensure you have an exit behind you in case you need to evacuate. If the fire extinguisher runs out, evacuate and alert the appropriate authorities. One of the easiest ways to remember how to adequately use a fire extinguisher is to remember the PASS method. PASS stands for pull, aim, squeeze, sweep. Pull the pin, aim at the base of the fire, squeeze the trigger, and sweep the nozzle back and forth. This section will include information on the bloodborne pathogens exposure control plan. What are bloodborne pathogens? They are microorganisms present in human blood and other potentially infectious bodily fluids and materials. There are three primary workplace pathogens: hepatitis B virus, hepatitis C virus, and human immunodeficiency virus, also known as HIV. The information shared in the exposure control plan applies to not only these pathogens, but any other potential bloodborne pathogen. Bloodborne pathogens, or BBPs, can affect any human exposed through contact with blood and other bodily fluids that can potentially be contaminated with blood. There is an opportunity for exposure to bloodborne pathogens in the workplace due to job tasks, tools, or in the event of an incident or injury. Affected employees are those that may have a higher probability of exposure, such as first aid and CPR responders, custodial, and janitorial staff. If you see blood in an area, contact your supervisor so that the trained employees can assist. Bloodborne pathogens can only be transmitted to you if you physically contact an infected person's blood or bodily fluid containing blood. Even then, your healthy skin is an excellent barrier to bloodborne pathogens. Contaminated blood or bodily fluid can enter your body through mucous membranes such as your eyes, mouth, or nose. If your skin is not intact at the point of contact with a contaminated blood or bodily fluid, the bloodborne pathogen could potentially be transmitted. Examples of non-intact skin include cuts, abrasions, hangnails, and so on. Additionally, bloodborne pathogens could potentially be transmitted if a contaminated sharp such as a needle or broken glass punctures the skin. Have you heard of universal precautions? Since exposure may happen at any time, all employees are expected to understand and adhere to universal precautions. This means that all human blood or other potentially infectious material will be considered infectious regardless of perceived status of the source individual. You should always avoid contact with fluids unless you have the proper protective equipment to protect yourself. To protect yourself from exposure, there are several methods of compliance that will ensure exposure is minimized or prevented. Make sure there is no food or drink in areas where a potential exposure may occur, such as a bathroom or locker room. There should be no smoking in those same areas. Be aware of applying cosmetics, lip balm, or inserting contact lenses if there is a possibility of exposure. Prevention methods include disposing of all sharps in appropriate containers after use, using personal protective equipment like gloves and safety glasses when there is a chance of exposure. Finally, hand washing is imperative for prevention of exposure and after incident care. Washing your hands for at least 60 seconds with soap and warm water prevents exposure and works to remove possible bloodborne pathogen infection. An important part of preventing exposure to bloodborne pathogens is proper decontamination and cleanup. As with all bodily fluids, practice following universal precautions by assuming contamination and wearing protective gloves. The bodily fluid disposal kit contains fluid cleanup material such as absorbent powder, a disinfectant solution, and a disposal bag. These can be found in or near first aid kits. If no disinfectant solution is available, it can be substituted with a solution consisting of 1 part bleach to 10 parts water. The general procedure to follow is: spray the solution on all contaminated areas, wait 10 minutes, Clean all affected areas or equipment with towels or rags, and treat all cleanup material as contaminated biological waste and dispose of properly. Small amounts of decontaminated waste may be disposed of in the normal waste bin. Contaminated waste must be packaged in proper containers, such as designated biohazard bags. Always ensure the label is in place and the container is sealed. Part of the exposure control plan includes medical surveillance in the event of an exposure as well as preventative care. If you have the potential for exposure as a first responder, you will be offered the hepatitis B vaccine within 10 days of assignment to that team. This vaccine is also offered to those individuals that have an exposure incident within 24 hours of the exposure. The vaccine will be offered at no cost to you and at a reasonable time and place. It includes a series of 3 injections that are effective in preventing hepatitis B. All vaccinations will be performed by or under the supervision of a licensed healthcare professional. Once offered, you have the right to decline, but have the right to change your mind. If you decline, you will be asked to complete a form for record-keeping purposes. In a bloodborne pathogens exposure event, these practices will be followed. Wash all exposed body surfaces with soap. Report the incident to your supervisor. The area must be secured to prevent others from coming in contact with blood. Disinfect the area and equipment involved. Save a sample for testing if necessary. Ensure documentation of the exposure incident is conducted. Confidential medical evaluation will be offered. Results will be provided to the exposed employee along with counseling and treatment, and the incident will be reviewed to prevent potential future occurrences. Remember, only handle bloodborne pathogen materials if you have been trained and authorized to do so safely. This section will include information regarding lockout-tagout and the Energy Control Program. Hazardous energy exists all around us. Hazardous energy may be live or stored. Live energy includes moving machine parts and electricity. In many cases, you can see this live energy, such as when equipment is moving or through a spark of electricity. Stored energy is often invisible and remains in equipment, so the hazard isn't known until an incident occurs. Hazardous energy that is typically stored in equipment includes heat, gravity, pneumatic, steam, or chemical energy. Understanding how hazardous energy affects the workplace and options to control it protect all workers from harm. Controlling hazardous energy such as electricity, air, or water pressure and moving machine parts is the key to preventing injuries from equipment. The term lockout describes the procedures and equipment that prevent machinery or equipment from being turned on. It also prevents machinery or equipment from moving and provides a warning to workers in the area by using a tagout device that equipment is shut down, locked out, and should remain that way until it has been serviced and brought back online. Under the Lockout-Tagout program, there are 3 groups of individuals that have responsibilities to ensure their safety. Authorized employees are those workers that service machinery and equipment. This may be maintenance personnel, an equipment manufacturer, or tradesperson. There are affected employees who operate machinery and equipment as part of their job task. Finally, there is the other employee category, which includes those employees that work near machinery but do not operate machinery themselves. For the purposes of this course, we are focused on affected employees. Additional training is available for authorized employees. As an affected employee, you have the following responsibilities. Notify maintenance when equipment needs to be serviced or repaired. Leave all lockout-tagout devices in place. Await instructions from maintenance or your supervisor before using equipment. Verify equipment is safe to operate following maintenance or service. And finally, you are required to follow all safety rules while operating equipment. You should be aware of the responsibilities of those employees that are authorized to perform lockout-tagout. A summary of their responsibilities include notifying all affected employees that equipment will be locked out, following the OSHA 6-step procedure for lockout-tagout, ensuring equipment is safe to operate, cleaning up the work area after servicing, and updating procedures when necessary. There are many types of machines and equipment that may require lockout-tagout to prevent harm during service and maintenance. A few examples include production equipment, conveyors, trash compactors, air compressors, power saws, pumps, presses, etc. Take a moment to think about the type of equipment you have in your workplace that may require lockout-tagout. There are several scenarios that trigger the need to lock out a machine or piece of equipment to protect workers from hazardous energy. Anytime there is a chance that a worker could be exposed to hazardous energy in any form, the machine should be locked out and tagged out before work commences. Lockout is required when machinery or equipment needs maintenance or service. It is also required if there is a chance of unexpected startup during service. If a safety device, such as a machine guard or safety interlock, has to be removed or bypassed, the equipment should be locked and tagged out before continuing. If a worker has to put any part of his or her body in harm's way, such as inside a machine, it should be locked and tagged before continuing. There are exceptions to the lockout-tagout program. The following are examples of exceptions. Work when the potential for hazardous energy does not exist, activities performed during routine production processes, and work on cord-controlled devices when the cord is the only source of energy to the equipment. The lockout-tagout standard dictates a 6-step procedure required for all equipment that needs to be locked out. From this 6-step procedure, every piece of equipment will have its own detailed procedure to ensure hazardous energy is controlled. The procedure includes the following steps. 1. Notify affected employees. 2. Shut down energized equipment by normal means such as shut-off switches, e-stops, and computer programs. 3. Isolate energy sources from equipment. 4. Lock out or tag out the energy isolation device with the proper equipment. 5. Release stored energy to ensure the equipment is in zero energy state. And 6. Test the equipment to make sure it is shut down and de-energized properly. In summary, as an affected employee under the lockout-tagout safety program, keep the following points in mind when working. Hazardous energy exists in many forms and can be dangerous if not controlled properly. Lockout-tagout is used when unexpected startup of machinery or stored energy release could occur. Be sure to leave all lockout-tagout devices in place and wait for instructions before using equipment, and verify that equipment is safe to operate following lockout-tagout of equipment. In this section, we will review the Hazard Communication Program. Hazard communication has also been referred to as the Right to Know law. The standard states that all employees have the right to know and understand the hazardous chemicals they use or are around and how to work with them safely. The Hazard Communication Program is a written program that is available for review. The program includes details about specific elements such as identifying hazardous chemicals at the facility, evaluating their hazards, and providing employees with information and training on those chemicals. The program ensures that safety data sheets, or SDSs, for chemicals are maintained and available for review at any time. The program also includes container labeling requirements so that chemical containers are labeled appropriately at all times. Please see your supervisor if you have questions regarding this program. Safety data sheets, or SDSs, provide comprehensive information about a chemical, including PPE, first aid, and ventilation requirements, as well as handling, storage, spill, and waste disposal considerations. SDSs must be readily available to employees at all times. This can be achieved through an SDS binder or a computer-based system. At a minimum, SDSs must be written in English but can be in different languages if needed. There are 9 pictograms under the GHS, or the Globally Harmonized System, that are used to convey the health, physical, and environmental hazards to those using the chemical. Pictograms are globally recognized symbols used by manufacturers, importers, exporters, and users of chemicals. Make sure you are familiar with these 9 pictograms so you can fully understand the physical and health hazards of chemicals at work and in your home. There are several pieces of information that must be included on a label, including the associated GHS pictograms noted on the previous slide. We will review these elements on the following slides. The label should include the product name, supplier identification and information, such as the company name, code for the chemical, and emergency contact information. A label will also include additional information needed to work with the chemical safely. Labels contain a signal word of either danger for more severe hazards or warning for less severe hazards. There will also be a written description indicating to what degree and why such a designator has been assigned. This helps categorize chemicals for safe use and storage. A hazard statement is a statement assigned to a hazard class and category that describes the nature and degree of the hazards associated with the chemical. In this example, the hazard statement indicates that the chemical is fatal if swallowed and causes skin irritation. A precautionary statement is a recommended measure that should be taken to minimize or prevent adverse effects resulting from exposure to a hazardous chemical or improper storage or handling. The statement on this label tells the user to wear protective gloves, wash hands thoroughly after handling, and do not eat, drink, or smoke when using this product. Hazardous chemicals present several types of hazards, including physical hazards and health hazards. Physical hazards include those that exhibit hazard by the nature of their physical properties. These include flammable chemicals, oxidizers, explosives, and compressed gases. Health hazards occur when a chemical can cause illness or other health problems, which can include short-term effects such as headaches, dizziness, or skin irritation, or long-term effects such as organ damage or cancer. Irritating, corrosive, and toxic chemicals are included in this category among the others listed on this slide. Personal protective equipment, or PPE. Here are some key points to understand regarding personal protective equipment. Every job function in every department is assessed for hazards. Each part of the body is taken into consideration during these assessments. PPE is selected in response to specific hazards, and proper wear and care of PPE is necessary to provide effective protection. Always wear the required PPE for the area you are in and based on the task you are doing. When signage or supervisors indicate that PPE should be worn, you must wear it. This is for your own safety to minimize the risk of injury or illness. Inspect all PPE regularly and replace worn or damaged PPE. Keep PPE clean and sanitary and store it in a clean, designated place. See your supervisor for more information and specific PPE requirements. Hearing conservation. How can noise be hazardous to your health and safety? First, noise can cause temporary or permanent hearing loss. Noise can cause you to misunderstand communication with coworkers. This could cause you to do something that causes an accident. Similarly, noise can cause you to miss important safety warnings, such as if a coworker tries to warn you of a nearby hazard. Finally, noise creates stress that can affect you both physically and mentally. You can generally tell when noise levels are close to or go beyond permissible exposure limits. Noisy conditions make normal conversation difficult or impossible. At 80 decibels, people have to speak very loudly to be heard. At 85 to 90 decibels, people need to shout in order to be understood. At 95 decibels, people have to move very close together in order to be able to hear each other at all. The Hearing Conservation Program is intended to help protect you from hearing damage and hearing loss. Here are the basic elements of our Hearing Conservation Program. All employees who are exposed to 85 decibels or more over 8-hour periods must participate in the program. As a participant, you receive a baseline and an annual audiogram, which measures your hearing, annual training on hearing loss and hearing protection. Hearing protection will be provided to you. Finally, we will continue to conduct noise exposure assessments, especially when our operations change, to accurately assess our employees' exposure to noise. To protect against hearing loss, the use of hearing protection is required by OSHA under different conditions of noise exposure. Hearing protection use is voluntary for employees who are exposed to an 8-hour time-weighted average of 85 to 90 decibels. Use of hearing protection becomes mandatory when there is an exposure to 8-hour time-weighted average of 90 decibels or higher, or there is an exposure to an 8-hour time-weighted average of 85 decibels when an SDS or hearing loss has already been measured or if a baseline hearing test has not yet been conducted. Individual companies may have requirements for wearing hearing protection that are stricter than OSHA's requirements. Hearing protection devices reduce your exposure to noise. Here's what these devices are expected to achieve. Hearing protection devices must reduce noise exposure to below an 8-hour time-weighted average of 90 decibels. For employees who have suffered an SDS, hearing protection must reduce exposure to less than an 8-hour TWA of 85 decibels. The noise reduction ratio, or NRR, is the number of decibels that different types of hearing protection devices are rated to reduce noise exposure. However, the NRR is only what is achieved through laboratory testing rather than in real-world applications. Therefore, you should assume that the real-world NRR of a hearing protection device will be significantly less than what may be shown on a package due to such variables as poor fit or incorrect use. For example, for earplugs, you should assume that the real-world NRR is no better than 1/3 of the NRR shown on the package. For earmuffs, assume that the real-world NRR is no better than about 1/2 of the NRR shown on the package. Note that removing your hearing protection device for short periods during the day will further reduce the real-world NRR of the device. Always wear your hearing protection when you are in noisy locations. Two of the most commonly used hearing protection devices are earplugs and canal caps. There are many different brands of earplugs, but they all work in a similar way. Typically, you roll or compress the foam plug into a cylinder, insert it into your ear, and allow the foam to expand and fill the ear canal. Earplugs are effective protection against noise and are lightweight and unobtrusive. Make sure that the plugs are clean before inserting them in your ear. You should get a new pair of earplugs each day or more frequently if necessary. Canal caps can be useful if you are exposed to loud noise for short periods of time or if you need to walk through a noisy area to get from one place to another. Canal caps usually do not provide the same degree of protection as earplugs because they do not enter the ear canal. Cotton balls are not an effective means of hearing protection and should not be used. Thank you for your time. New hire safety training is now complete. Please see your supervisor if you have any questions.